You finally make it to Europe. You've saved for the trip. You've planned your itinerary. You've dreamed about the food, the landmarks, the beautiful streets, and all the memories you're going to make. Then, somewhere along the way, you start losing money on things you never expected. An overpriced meal because you were hungry near a famous landmark. A taxi that costs far more than you thought. An attraction ticket you could have bought for less. An expensive souvenir you didn't really need. And sometimes, you don't even realize you've fallen into a tourist trap until it's too late. The good news? You don't have to travel like a detective to avoid them. In this video, I'm going to show you 10 common tourist traps in Europe that can waste your money, and what you can do instead. And make sure you stay until number 10, because that final mistake isn't about one particular restaurant, ticket, or attraction. It's a mistake that can quietly make your entire European vacation more expensive. Let's get started. Introduction. Welcome back to Travel Wander, where we talk about practical travel tips, honest experiences, and the things you should know before exploring Europe. Now, before we start, I want to make something clear. A tourist trap doesn't necessarily mean a place is bad. A famous restaurant can be excellent. A popular attraction can absolutely be worth visiting. And sometimes paying more for convenience is completely reasonable. The problem is paying more without realizing why you're paying more. That's what we're trying to avoid. Because when you're traveling, it's very easy to make small decisions that don't seem expensive at the time. 5 euros here, 10 euros there, 20 euros somewhere else. But add them together over a week or two, and suddenly you've spent hundreds more than you planned. So let's look at the traps, and more importantly, how to avoid them. Tourist trap number 1. Restaurants right beside major attractions. Let's start with one you've probably heard before. You're standing beside a famous European landmark. You're hungry. You've been walking for hours. You look around and there's a restaurant right there. Perfect. You sit down. You order. Then the bill arrives. And you realize you could probably have eaten somewhere else for considerably less. Now, I'm not saying every restaurant beside a famous attraction is overpriced. That's important, but restaurants in extremely tourist-heavy locations have a very obvious advantage. You are already there. You don't have to search. You don't have to walk. And when you're tired and hungry, convenience becomes incredibly valuable. So here's what I recommend. Before sitting down, walk a few streets away from the busiest attraction. You don't need to disappear into another neighborhood. Sometimes 5 or 10 minutes is enough. Compare a couple of menus. Look at the prices. See what local customers are eating. And most importantly, don't assume that the restaurant with the best view automatically has the best food. Sometimes you're paying for the view. And that's okay, if you know you're paying for it. The goal isn't to avoid tourist areas completely. It's to make an informed choice. Because there is another trap that can cost you money before you even take your first bite. Tourist trap number 2. Not checking the menu before sitting down. This sounds incredibly simple, but when you're traveling, it's easy to overlook. You see an attractive restaurant. You see people eating. You see a menu outside. And you think, let's go. But before sitting down, actually look at the prices. Don't just look at the pictures. Read the menu. Check what comes with the meal. Check the prices of drinks. And if something isn't clear, ask. This is especially important when you're traveling somewhere where you're unfamiliar with the local dining customs. You don't want to discover unexpected costs when the bill arrives. And here's another useful rule. Never feel pressured to sit down just because someone is inviting you in. You can look at the menu. You can say thank you. And you can keep walking. You are allowed to change your mind. A restaurant isn't a good deal simply because someone tells you it is. And speaking of things that look convenient, let's talk about transportation. Tourist trap number 3. Taking the first taxi you see. After a long flight, the last thing you want to do is stand at an airport trying to figure out transportation. You have luggage. You're tired. You just want to get to your hotel. And that's exactly when convenience can become expensive. Before traveling, research how transportation works at your destination. Does the airport have an official taxi rank? Is there a regulated airport transfer? Is public transportation convenient? Is there an official taxi app or ride-hailing option? Knowing this before you land gives you choices. And choices give you power. Don't simply follow the first person who approaches you and says, "Taxi?" Instead, look for official signs and designated transportation areas. If you're unsure, ask airport staff where the official taxi rank or transportation area is. And here's something else. Know roughly how far your hotel is from the airport. If you have no idea where you're going, it becomes much harder to recognize when something doesn't seem right. You don't have to know the exact fare beforehand, but having a general idea of the route and your options can prevent a lot of unnecessary stress. And transportation isn't the only place where tourists can lose money. Tourist trap number 4. Exchanging money without checking the rate. Currency is one of those things travelers don't always think about until they need it. You're in a new country. You need cash. You see an exchange office. You walk in. Simple. But the rate you're offered may not always be the best available. And that's why you should never assume that the most convenient exchange location is automatically the best one. Before exchanging a large amount of money, compare your options. Understand the currency you're using. Know roughly what the current exchange rate is. And be careful when a service advertises something that sounds like "no commission." No commission doesn't necessarily mean the overall exchange is favorable. The exchange rate itself matters too. And if you're using a card, pay attention to the currency you're being charged in when given a choice. Sometimes you'll be offered the option to pay in your home currency instead of the local currency. Make sure you understand what you're agreeing to before accepting. The point isn't to become an expert in foreign exchange. It's simply to stop making money decisions blindly. Because the next trap is something that can make you spend money without even feeling like you're spending it. Tourist trap number 5. Buying too many, Europe, souvenirs. There's something exciting about buying souvenirs. You see a beautiful magnet, a t-shirt, a keychain, a little figurine, something with the name of the city printed across it. And you think, this will remind me of my trip. And that's true. Souvenirs can be wonderful. But here's the problem. When you're visiting several European cities, you can end up buying the same type of souvenir over and over. One in Paris, another in Rome, another in Amsterdam, another in Barcelona, and suddenly your suitcase is full. You spent money on things you didn't really need. So instead of buying something simply because it says the name of the city, ask yourself, would I still want this if it didn't say Paris, Rome, or Amsterdam on it? If the answer is yes, it may be worth buying. If the answer is no, take a photo and keep walking. Better still, look for something genuinely connected to the place. A locally made product, a small piece of art, a food item you can safely take home. Something that actually reminds you of the experience rather than something mass-produced for tourists. And speaking of things that look attractive, let's talk about attractions. Tourist trap number 6. Buying tickets from unofficial sources. Imagine arriving at one of the most famous attractions in Europe. You see people selling tickets nearby. Someone tells you, skip the line. It sounds tempting, especially when you see a huge queue. But before buying, ask yourself, who am I buying this ticket from? For major attractions, start by checking the official website. Look at the official ticket price. Look at the entry requirements. Look at whether reservations are required. Then compare that with whatever you're being offered. Sometimes third-party tours or ticket services can provide genuine value. For example, you might be paying for a guide or a special experience. But you want to understand exactly what you're paying for. Don't pay extra simply because someone promises that you're getting a better deal. And don't assume that a person standing near an attraction is automatically affiliated with that attraction. A few minutes of research before your trip can save you money and prevent unnecessary problems. Which brings us to another mistake that can quietly drain your travel budget. Tourist trap number 7. Paying for things you don't actually need. Travel companies are very good at making things sound essential. Special passes, premium experiences, skip the line options, guided tours, upgraded transportation, extra packages. Some of these can be excellent. The problem is buying them automatically. Before paying for an upgrade, ask, what problem is this solving for me? If you're saving 3 hours of waiting, maybe it's worth it. If a tour gives you access to information you genuinely want, maybe it's worth it. But if you're buying something simply because it sounds more luxurious, stop and think. You don't have to purchase every upgrade offered to you. And this is especially important when you're traveling on a budget. Saving money doesn't mean refusing to spend. It means spending deliberately. I'd rather spend money on one experience I genuinely care about than waste the same amount on 5 upgrades I barely notice. And that brings us to something that almost every traveler needs. Food. Tourist trap number 8. Eating every meal at a restaurant. When you're traveling through Europe, food is part of the experience. So yes, enjoy restaurants. Try local dishes. Have that memorable dinner. But don't feel like every meal has to happen in a restaurant. One of the easiest ways to control your food budget is to mix things up. Try a local bakery for breakfast. Visit a food market. Pick up fruit, cheese, bread, or snacks from a grocery store. Have a picnic in a park. Try a casual local cafe. Then save your restaurant budget for the meals you really care about. This can actually make the trip more interesting. You're not only experiencing restaurants, you're experiencing how people buy and enjoy everyday food. And you may discover something wonderful. A bakery you never planned to visit. A market you didn't know existed. A local snack you've never tasted before. Sometimes the most memorable food experience isn't the expensive dinner. It's the simple meal you discovered while wandering. But there's another way travelers accidentally spend too much on food. Tourist trap number 9. Assuming the most popular place is the best place. You've probably seen it. A restaurant has a huge line outside. Everyone is taking pictures. The food is all over social media. And suddenly you think, I have to eat here. But popularity isn't the same thing as value. A restaurant can be famous because the food is incredible. It can also be famous because it went viral. Those are not necessarily the same thing. This is where research becomes useful. Don't rely on one review. Look for patterns. Read what people consistently say. Look at recent reviews. Check the menu. And ask yourself what you actually want. Do you want a famous Instagram experience? Then go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. But if your priority is good local food at a reasonable price, you may want to explore beyond the most photographed restaurants. Sometimes you don't need a 5-star recommendation. You just need to walk another street. And now we've reached the final trap. This one isn't a single place. It's a mindset. Tourist trap number 10. Trying to do everything. This may be the most expensive mistake of all. Not because someone is charging you too much, but because you're constantly convincing yourself that you need to spend more. More cities, more attractions, more tours, more restaurants, more experiences, more transportation. You see a list of 50 things to do in Paris, and suddenly you feel like you need to do all 50. Then you move to another city and start the process again. Before you know it, you've spent a huge amount of money trying to make your trip perfect. But here's the truth. You don't need to do everything. You don't need to see every attraction. You don't need to visit every city. You don't need to eat at every famous restaurant. You don't need to buy every experience. Choose what genuinely matters to you. If you love history, spend money on museums and historic sites. If food is your passion, spend more on memorable meals. If nature is your thing, invest in experiences that take you outdoors. If you simply want to walk around beautiful cities, you don't need an expensive itinerary to have an incredible trip. The best travel budget isn't necessarily the smallest one. It's the one that reflects what you actually value. The big lesson. So what do all these tourist traps have in common? Restaurants, taxis, currency exchange, souvenirs, tickets, upgrades, food, attractions. They're all designed around one thing: convenience. And convenience isn't bad. Sometimes convenience is exactly what you need. But when you're tired, unfamiliar with a place, or in a hurry, you're more likely to pay for convenience without stopping to ask whether it's worth it. That's why one of the best things you can do before traveling is simply research your options. Know how transportation works. Know the official ticket sources. Understand the local currency. Research the attractions you care about. Learn where locals tend to eat. And most importantly, don't be afraid to walk away. You can say no. You can compare. You can think about it. You can choose something else. You are in control of your travel budget. Conclusion: Europe doesn't have to be an expensive dream that leaves you wondering where all your money went. You can enjoy incredible food, visit famous landmarks, ride trains through beautiful countries, explore historic cities, and still make smarter decisions with your money. You don't have to avoid every tourist area. You don't have to distrust every restaurant. And you definitely don't have to turn your vacation into a financial spreadsheet. Just become a little more aware. Before you buy something, ask, am I paying for something I actually want, or am I paying because it's convenient? That one question can change the way you travel. Because the goal isn't simply to spend less. The goal is to spend your money on the things that make your trip memorable. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever fallen into a tourist trap while traveling? Maybe you paid too much for a meal. Maybe you took an expensive taxi. Maybe you bought a souvenir you regretted. Or maybe you discovered a clever way to save money while traveling through Europe. Tell me your experience in the comments. And if you're planning your first trip to Europe, tell me, which of these tourist traps are you most worried about? Your answer could help another traveler avoid making the same mistake. If this video helped you, give it a like and subscribe to Travel Wander for more practical Europe travel tips, honest travel experiences, money-saving advice, and ideas to help you make the most of your European adventure. And remember, you don't have to see everything. You don't have to buy everything. You don't have to spend everything. You just have to make your trip your own. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep exploring, travel smarter, and never stop wandering.